This is Collectibles.com Unscripted. I'm Dietrich.
And I'm Alex.
What would a podcast about collectibles be without a conversation with an avid comic book collector? Angus Byers has over 10,000 comic book issues in his collection, and we're thrilled to have him on the podcast today. Hey, Angus, what's up?
Not much. How are you guys?
Doing very well.
Very well.
Very well. Great to be connected with you. Tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, like, where you are and, what you do.
Sure. Well, like you said, my name's Angus. I'm based out of Montreal. I'm a tattooer.
Ooh.
I've been doing that for 12 years.
When you say tattooer, you're an artist, a tattoo artist. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I've been an artist my entire life, like as long as I can remember. One of the first drawing I can remember doing is Optimus Prime. That was one of the ones that I remember my folks being like, "Oh, that's awesome." And I'm like, that looks, it was just all squares and points, but it looked like I could see Optimus Prime in it. It was like I was trying to render something. Yeah, I worked in comics for a little bit. It was mostly indie stuff and like backgrounds on a graphic novel. Wow. I was a makeup artist for years. That's kind of how I got into comics. Like everything that I've done is sort of related to each other in a weird way.
Yeah.
The people that you meet, Yeah, I've been collecting comics. Like the first comic I ever had, I think was the 1980s The Thing. I think it's issue 24. I can't quite remember. My mom and dad, they grew up in the 50s and 60s. So, comics were sort of universal. Like it was just something that you'd sit around and read.
As long as we're putting dates around it, before we jump into the questions, I want to put, I had these, I had these also at the end of the podcast last time, but we think, because when it comes to collectibles and collectors, we know there's a whole universe. People collect all sorts of things, and we don't ever want to presume who's listening knows about comics. Most likely they do. That's probably why they're interested. But we've got these little fun facts here that I'm just going to read off right now, sort of set the table, and then we'll dive in specific to you. But since you were throwing out dates, how about this? The first comic book in the U.S. was The Adventures of Mr. Obadiah Oldbuck, and it was sold as a hardcover in 1842. Bet you didn't know that.
I did not.
DC Comics, then Action Comics, introduced Superman in 1938. And the most valuable comic book of all time is Action Comics #1, 1938. And this is the comic in which Superman made his first appearance. And a pristine copy of this sold online for a record, guess what? Drum roll, $3.2 million in August of 2014. So there's value in comics, but we don't need to tell you that. The Hulk was originally gray. I can't imagine a gray Hulk. He's got to be green. And Marvel changed him to green after problems with ink in their presses. Go figure. So it was a blessing in disguise. The term graphic novel was coined by Richard Kyle in 1964. Okay. And last one, talk about the power of comics. In 2002, a 4-year-old boy suffering from hearing loss didn't want to wear a hearing aid because superheroes don't. To get him to wear his hearing aids, Marvel Comics created a superhero with a hearing aid called Blue Ear. How cool is that?
Story.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
So my first question would be, our producer Chris told us that you have more than 10,000 different issues. And so where and how do you store them? Like, do you have a special vault, or is it, if you turn the camera around, like they're all over around the place? Tell us more.
Well, I have my Sanctum Sanctorum, to steal a line from Doctor Strange. It's my comic room. I've got a wall of trades, and I'm sort of a universal collector. Like comics, I think is my main focus, but I have my wall of D&D books. I have my action figures on the other side. I've got, I guess, Prime collection. I've got drawer pull boxes. So unlike your standard ones that you sort of, have to take the lid off the top. These pull out from the front. I've got a couple in like a safety deposit box because they're very valuable. And I also have a basement. It's cool and dry, but unfinished, where I store most of. I don't know if I'd call it my bulk, but like I sort of cycle through every few years and like pare down pretty heavily. And then like, cause I still like, I'm a Wednesday warrior. Like I go to the comic shop every Wednesday. Like I have therapy in the morning for my brain. And then I have therapy right after that for my soul with the comics. And
Wow.
What a line. That's
yeah, yeah.
awesome.
What a line. What a
Yeah.
line. That's going to be the quote.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
are you sure? Are you sure it's not therapy that comics don't serve both?
I mean,
functions?
yes, but I mean, therapy is,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
it's wonderful. Love it. I mean, they sort of end up everywhere.
Storage is important. I was going to say storage is important. I mean, we ask a question like that. I mean, in our last episode, Alex and I, we met with a gentleman who collects. He's the Guinness Book of World Record holders for Monopoly board
Oh,
collection.
wow.
I don't know what he had. Is it 4,000, Alex? Was it or
Over
something more?
4,000. Yeah. Over
Yeah.
4,000.
So I mean,
Holy
we
cats.
made the joke. We said, "Hey, what are you sitting around surrounded by Monopoly boxes?" And he said, "Sure as shit." And he turned it around. There he was. But yeah, no, that's cool. So you keeping them stored well, right? They're valuable. You keep them in plastic sleeves as well, each one.
Or do you grade them as well? Like, do you grade stuff or?
Yeah, I do both. I don't do a heavy amount of grading.
Mhm.
So my family runs a kids bookstore, and that was my day job for a long time while I was trying to find an art job that I could live off of. And because like I was raised surrounded by books. Like my before even before my mom opened the bookstore, we were heavy readers, and that's one of the reasons she opened it. She was having a hard time finding kids books for my sister and I. So anyway, like working there, like I was, because of course, surrounded by books and like amazing literature, I needed to rebel by reading comics, and luckily, like my family was just happy that I was reading. So yeah, but at the same time, sometimes she was like, "Why don't you just go read this?" Like here, read this classic, and I'm like, well, I got this stack that I got to work through,
Well,
um
Angus, you just segued into my question here, my first
oh,
question, to kick it off, because look, we already said there's collectors for all sorts of things out there, right? So
absolutely.
when meeting with someone, you kind of want to know, I mean, for me, I shared with you before the show that I'm a lunchbox collector, and yeah,
Yeah.
I could talk about what the inspiration for that was, and what took me down the rabbit hole. But why comic books for you? Why? I mean, you said you collect other things, but clearly with 10,000 issues, comic books resonates the most with you. So why comic books? When did you fall in love with comics and start collecting them, and not just your rebellious nature for the parents? What took you down the rabbit hole?
I mean, I was between 10 and 12 during that early 90s like boom. So they were everywhere, but I remember one of my mom's coworkers, her son was moving out of the house, and he was like in his 20s and moving out to the West Coast, and she just had a big like packing box full of comics that
Mm.
he'd read from like the 70s to the 80s. And she was like, I'm throwing stuff out, do you think your son would want this? And my mom's like, oh yeah, he could use some comics. Like I had a few,
Yeah.
but like that showed up, and that was
Throwing
it.
comic books out, just hearing that.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
I mean, like when there's stuff that I'm like, I'm not, it's bulk stuff, it's
Yeah.
dog-eared and red and all that. I try and give that to my friends' kids, just to hopefully spark something in them, like what happened in me. But yeah, that was the big thing. I remember that summer I brought that box to my neighborhood pool, and I was just reading them, in between like swimming lessons and swim team. And it was the best, like just me and my friends sitting around and like passing comics around. And then because, people saw that, I just ended up getting more. Like my uncles were like, oh, he's into comics, and they gave me a big packing box full of Mad Magazine, and they're like 60s and 70s war comics. And then for my 11th birthday, 10th or 11th birthday, my dad showed up with 2 long boxes for me, like full. Because someone had shown up at the store, like, "Hey, do you sell, like, do you buy used comics?" And my dad's like, "I don't actually sell those, but let me take a look." And that was my birthday present. And like it's these big masses that have shown up. And because I'm a completionist, I have to read everything. Like, yeah, that I think that was the big catalyst.
What was your favorite out of all of those? Which you know, do you have any direction war comics, like specific action heroes, or
I mean, I loved Sergeant Rock. Like the Joe Kubert art on Sergeant Rock was like so far beyond what everybody else was doing, because there was a bunch of Charlton comics in there, and like Dell and Gold Key, and like but you could tell that those dudes were just like showing up and working for a living, and Kubert was like, "No, this is what I do. This is my passion. This is what's going to be good." I mean, the X-Men comics that I got from that collection were mind blowing, because it was that late 80s. There weren't any like Claremont issues, but there was a bunch of the early Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri stuff. And ROM issue 1 was in there from that first box. And I don't know if you know that one. It was one of Marvel's like toy marketing things. Like the ROM action figure was like
Mhm.
a foot tall, and he had like weird sensors, and he's this weird space robot. So they gave him a whole background. And that toy was a flash in the pan, was on the shelf for a season, barely any other tie-in products to it.
Wow.
But the comic lasted for like 75 issues, and it had this whole deep thing. And Marvel's recently gotten the rights back to reprint them. So they're finally, yeah. I love
Movie
Marvel.
coming soon, right? As they
Yeah.
always.
Probably, yeah.
Do you do you have the action figure?
I don't.
Do you have the comic?
I have every issue there.
So you still have it from the time.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
ROM number 1 I've kept. Like
Awesome.
the toy's always been just like slightly out of my league. But like I don't know, that comic was just so great. And like I think it's even a Frank Miller cover. I think Frank Miller did some stuff like before he blew up. Like late 70s, I think. Don't
Oh,
quote me on
awesome.
that. I know there's like 1,000 internet nerds who are just like pulling their hair and gnashing
They're
their teeth
waiting.
right
They're
now.
waiting already on the sidelines.
Yeah, exactly.
Alex, did you have a follow up? Because otherwise, I've got something for him.
Yeah, I guess I mean, like, this fits well. If you can share it, obviously, what's your most valuable, comic which you have?
I mean, that's kind of hard to say.
Maybe in a sense valuable for you and valuable generally speaking, like in terms of real
Or
value.
rarity, right?
Yeah,
Rarity, yeah, right.
I mean, yeah, I think I can cross off all of that with one. And so I think it was about 5-6 years ago, I bought Giant Size X-Men number 1 off of a fellow collector and pal of mine. I think it is to this day like the most I've ever spent on a single issue. And it was like I spent $1,000. Like
Mhm.
that's, and I know that sounds like to some people out there that, oh, child's play or stuff like that. I'm not rich. Like I'm just slow, like slow
You're
and steady. And
passionate, man.
Yes,
That's what it is.
yeah.
You're passionate.
You're
and
rich
this
and
is the most-
passionate. You're wealthy and
Yeah.
passionate.
Thanks. And so I paid it off like incrementally, and the guy was really chill. I mean, I love that book.
Hmm.
Like that was one that, like, that's one that I got graded, but that was one that I was like, I have to read this. Like full on, like I'd read it before. Like I have a bunch of different reprints of it. I have a bunch of different like trades and like various versions of it. But that one, I was like, I have to go page by page and just flip through all of this to like get that full effect. Like
Yeah.
this is I love this.
Do you wear white gloves?
No. I'm not a condition guy.
Oh,
Like I'm not like I have friends, and I know lots of people who are like, Oh, it's got to be fucking pristine if I'm gonna
Yeah,
spend any sort of money on it. I mean, grow it because that box of comics that I got that I was reading by the pool, like they were read and they were loved, and I have that tactile.
yeah,
When I see something that's
oh yeah,
dog-eared and I mean, also, again, not rich, so it's if I can buy like a low-grade version, but still have that issue.
sure,
Yeah.
Like it's great. Like I have Daredevil issue 2, the cover's detached, it's missing part of it, it's missing 2 pages,
yeah.
but I bought it for $20. Like I was like, okay, like sure, but I have Daredevil issue 2. Could I resell it for more? Maybe
But
a little bit.
you've been collecting for how many years now? Remind us again. I think about this.
I mean, like I've fallen in and out of collecting, like hunting and all that stuff. Like I've been
Just the accumulation process, right?
the accumulation process has been over 30 years.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
that's you're a veteran collector, right?
I guess so at this
Oh
point.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm in my 40s,
I
like
think
like
I think over 10 years of collecting, you can start qualifying for the veteran status. But
yeah.
do you have any idea? Any idea? I mean, this kind of ties into Alex's question. I mean, never mind rarity and value of a single. I mean, have you ever thought like how much you've spent? And you don't actually have to say the amount, but just curious, like do you know what you've spent and do you know what the total collection's worth?
No and no. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like for me that's a hurdle that I have to get over every once in a while. Thinking about the money aspect to it. So, like talking, so there was a big comic book. There was, I think, a collector's bubble that happened, between like 2020 and
Yeah.
2021, 22, where things got overpriced.
Hmm,
Like things were just so high value. It was a great time to sell,
yeah,
but it was a hard time to buy, and that made it hard for me at some point because I was like, I shoot, am I not going to be able to afford to do this? Like, am I only going to be able to buy
yeah,
like what junk comics, which is, I mean, my favorite, but like at the same time, are some things just going to be immediately priced out?
yeah.
Um,
I asked the question, Angus, because something that as fellow collectors, Alex knows
yeah.
about, like tracking, valuing, just managing it. And it almost even comes to the point where, like with my lunch boxes, I start losing track.
Oh yeah.
Like, how do you know you're not buying something that you already have? I mean, is it just memory?
I mean, I've done that many times.
Yeah.
So you've got 10,000 comics,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
5,000 of them are duplicates.
Yeah, well, I mean, not
I'm
not that
kidding.
bad, but
I'm
there's
kidding.
definitely been times where like a comic showed up in the mail, or
Yeah.
like I went to the shop and I was like, oh crap, I don't have that one. Like bring it home, like
Yeah.
flipping through my drawers and like sliding it in, or about to slide it in, and like, all right, I have that one.
Yeah.
Oh damn, like,
Hey, I got one for you because you actually mentioned it, and that was that great quote about your mind and your soul. And I was, thinking about it. Hobby shops are a big thing. I don't know how. I don't know how. I guess they're pretty big in Canada, but certainly in the U.S. as well. And for some, really considered a special place. You say you go there every week. Is that's how often you go?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I go every week. I mean, my pile's not always huge. It's like going to church. It's a ritual,
Yeah.
you know?
Why is that? I mean, what makes it so special? Is the people that are there, just the kind
Yeah.
of
The
okay.
hunt, like the
Yeah,
hunt
that
to
that
discover
definitely.
something. What is it like exactly?
Yeah, I mean, like, so my local shop crossover is walking distance from my house, which is great. I haven't had that since I was a kid. Most of the time, like I had to like travel to go get my comics, or like when I was a kid, there was one that was like it was like I mean about 2 kilometers away, or about a mile or something like that, and it was a long walk for like a 9 to 12 year old, and I didn't get them weekly. Like I had an allowance, but I didn't have enough money to like buy a comic. Like I had enough money to like buy a comic every week, but I wasn't always going to buy the same one. Like I just went and, like perused the shelves for at least an hour and then bought one because I had $2. But yeah, no, I am like my little, like my local shop crossover. The people there are awesome. And, I'm usually one of the first people in every day, like on Wednesday, like just given the schedule. And when I don't go every week, it's like something feels a little off, I've gone to other shop, like, I was going to another shop that closed down just because, everybody retired. I stopped going to another shop because my partner and I would go and buy comics and encountered some weird gatekeeping,
Hmm.
like that sort of thing that's like, I don't know, just bullshit, man. Like these are for everybody.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like it doesn't matter how long you've been into them.
Yeah.
If it brings you joy, it brings you
Oh,
joy,
well,
and
exactly.
that,
Yeah. And
yeah,
it
those weird
should be
tests.
accessible. And what you said earlier, I mean, it really that resonates. You said about giving away comics, to kids just to try to ignite that spark, right? Because
Yeah,
it's we see it a lot in sports, right? I mean, some say that things like football might be dying out, or golf might be, but you do. There's things to be done to really inspire a new generation, I guess, when it comes to collectibles, and particularly something like comics and sports cards. It's incumbent on collectors to share that and bring people into the passion. Sounds like you're one of
well, absolutely. I mean, just to talk financials for a second,
them.
if people want to retire on their comic collections or what have you, you need to have people who are willing to buy them later. And if you're like
Yeah.
75 and selling to other 75-year-olds or in that range, like they're probably just wanting to sell their shit also, like there's that 30-year window,
Yeah.
like when people get to their late 30s to mid 40s, that I feel is when the spike's the highest
Yeah.
on nostalgia and people being like, oh, I'm not a kid anymore.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to feel some childlike joy. And I mean, admittedly,
Yeah.
me too. So, like if you're only making comics for adults
Yeah.
and like you're going to kill the collector market for that. I mean, I don't think you can destroy an art form like that with because it's always going to change. Like people are going to get into different things. You look at the sort of transition between like floppy North American comics versus like manga, like
Mm.
the changeover to the popularity of that. Like, oh, I think what is it, like one book of Naruto outsells all floppy comics just by numbers.
Hmm.
It was something I heard that was ludicrous. Like I was like, oh, that's gigantic.
I,
Yeah,
I
you
I I
gotta.
saw some. I also saw some stats lately about this, and then there are so many even websites around manga, and into the
Mhm.
millions of visitors, and not just in Asia, but across the world. So
Oh,
this is
it's
catching
universal
up
now.
for sure. You said that you are a tattoo artist by day, right? So and
Yeah.
I would be interesting, it would be interesting for me to hear how did you combine those two, if you do, like, are you, what was the craziest tattoo, with some comic motives, which you did potentially even, and are you
Everybody's
inspired
walking
by
around
comic?
Canada with a Superman tattoo. Everybody.
Yeah, I hope there is something more crazy, but yeah. And, do you draw inspiration from comics when you kind of like drawing tattoos? I guess this would be interesting.
Well, I mean, like right now, my style is sort of I do a lot of black work, a lot of fine line, a lot of dot work. So, I mean, I've actually been doing a bunch more like manga images. Like, I love tattooing Junji Ito's images. Like, I don't know if you know that guy. He does these wonderful horror comics that are just unsettling. Uzumaki comes to mind immediately. If you look at my Instagram, Angus Tattoos, you can see that's the first one right up at the top. Is I did a portrait of Junji Ito, but with the Uzumaki spiral on half of his
Yeah.
face. Comics inspired me to draw. I wanted to be a comic artist.
Mm.
Like that was like when I was I mean, it was only working in comics that sort of made me realize, like, oh, this isn't really a full time job for me. Like I couldn't do this full time because like it's lonely. It's a lonely job. Like they don't really have like those bullpens anymore that they used to have, where you had like five artists in a room, like smoking and fucking, passing the pages to each other. Like I finished the
Yeah.
pencils.
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
you do the inks, Joe, and then like Mac will finish the lettering. I was like, I was hoping it was something like that, but when I was working at it, I was like, just been in my house all day drawing by myself, and I'm a social animal. But that's one of the, like those early '90 comics, like and all those classic ones that I had, like Joe Kubert, like inspired me to draw. Like that's more than like a straight up like comic tattoo. And I've done a lot of them. Like I did a really, I don't know, I'm just thinking about this fun Wolverine one that I did a few years ago. And I was like, that was great. And like my dream tattoo, if anyone out there is listening and we vibe on this,
Nice.
I'd love to do a back piece with like Galactus in the background, like with his hands forward, with like Kirby crackle everywhere, and maybe the Fantastic Four, Silver
Oh,
Surfer, like in the foreground. Like that's always been on my list of like tattoos that I would like to do. I'm gonna have to just draw it one of these days and like put it out there and
yeah.
see.
Yeah. Hey, how about we don't want to encourage you to disrobe or take any clothes off, but anything you can share, because I sometimes see little peaks on your arms. What you got? Anything?
Yeah, like of comic tattoos, like the
Oh, here he goes.
most
He's gonna drop his
straightforward
piano.
ones. Don't fall over. Let me move the phone. That'll be easier.
Oh,
I don't know if you can see that. I have a Galactus tattoo, but
oh,
it's a
Oh
Galactus
wow.
Cupid doll.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's my big comic tattoo. I don't know why Galactus, like it's such a cool concept.
yeah.
Just an like a dude who could walk on a city, like just that big, who eats planets. The baby celestials inside of planets, or cosmic energy and all that sort of thing. Like a living space god. Like what else could you call it? It's that big. Like, but then to have it as a cute little baby doll on the side of my leg, I was like, yeah,
Angus, I've got something. I didn't think I'd have an opportunity to do a little show and tell, but I actually have something that I think will resonate. Hopefully, you'll appreciate,
yeah.
particularly when you described time working as a comic book illustrator. But over for Christmas, I ended up getting something. Here, take a look at this. The Marvel
Oh,
Book of Design. And there's something, I spent a little bit of time going through this. I mean, it's just beautiful. The illustrations on this are super cool. But
yeah.
there's one page in particular that, kind of thinking about our call here today. Take a look at this. Just wanted to pull something here. The craft of a cover, right? And then the second page on this, and this will probably speak to you. Think of this: the anatomy of a comic, right?
Yeah.
And like that is pretty cool. I mean, how when you're planning out kind of how this relates to tattoos. I mean, you already just shared, something that you'd love to do, but how do you go about coming up with concepts, or do people just come in and they tell you exactly what
With
they
a
want, or
printout.
something?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, yeah. Sometimes people want the exact, this, and I'll be like, sure, like that'll work great as a tattoo, or let me redesign it so it's going to
Yeah,
last better. But I've always said that tattoos are collaborative.
yeah,
Like it's always teamwork. There's going to be the client and the artist that have to work together, and I mean, at the end of the day, client's got to be happy, but to do this work, I have to be happy too.
sure,
Like I don't want to do I don't want to do something that I would suck at.
yeah.
Like at the end of the day,
Have
like
you turned some away that had a concept you didn't want to do?
yeah, a couple of times, but not that often. Most of the time, like I was talking about this with one of my clients on Monday, because he had this idea for, he loves Kiss,
Oh,
and
sure.
yeah. He wanted this little like Gene Simmons logo. My friend and client wanted it as a sort of a bat symbol, like shining off on the clouds, coming out of one of those big spotlights. And I was like, I don't know if that could work, like let
Yeah.
me before and I said to him, I'm like, he's like, what do you think? Because initially he just wanted the like logo
Yeah.
or symbol, and I was like, I think the symbol's stronger. I'm not sure, but let me doodle it up. If I can't come up with it, and then sitting down at the drawing table and drawing it, I was like, oh, this just flew out of my pen. Like,
Wow.
oh, this looks great. A few adjustments, and it's like I try to keep an open mind with that. I mean, like I'm never gonna do anything like hateful or bigoted
Yeah.
or
Of
anything like
course.
that. Like that's just a flat out like get the
Yeah.
fuck out of my
Right.
shot. But if there's an idea that I'm like, let me
Yeah.
at least try to doodle this.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes I've said to people like, okay, you want to put 50 things in a 3-inch space. I can't fit that and have that look good. But like we can either make the space bigger, we can edit, like that sort of teamwork. And I mean that's comics,
Yeah.
like that's the unsung heroes of comics have always been editors. Jim Starlin, I'm pretty sure he's the guy who did Valiant. There's like the main driving force. Anyway, those people who like really can tell these people like, no, that's a bad idea, or like, why don't we try this, or like, doing all the negotiations, that sort of thing is. God, more people should be into editors. Like I should be more into editors.
Does the name Infantino mean anything to you?
Carmine Infantino. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Was it
Alex,
the Batman poster
you
you
got
have?
it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got it,
that's
Alex.
awesome.
That's right.
Yeah.
Carmine Infantino. It's like, I grew up. I didn't have a lot of comics. Like I didn't have a lot of much of anything. But it was this was one thing that I treasured, and it's 1973 or maybe 70, early 70, but a Batman poster. And it just love the style, and it's
yep.
unique to see how these different artists, and sometimes the transition between artists, how they influence the superhero, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Everybody draws them different, like, and you think of those 90s like image founders and stuff. Like I was just watching a whole thing about McFarlane and Liefeld, and like they broke the molds by not listening to the editors, like I'm a good kid. I never like to get in trouble or do anything like that. But I mean, these people are the type of people who hate to hear the word no, so they're always gonna like push the walls on that, or like, oh yeah, we're doing the whole comic sideways, and I didn't tell you until the last minute, and here's the final art. And what you want to publish the comic a month late, like being able to twist a little bit like that.
Angus, I have a question. Like, what are your thoughts around, like, the how comic book culture gonna evolve in the future? Do you see any trends? Or is it like in fashion? Things from the 70s and 80s are popping up again, right, and getting popular. Do you see something like that in the comic book culture, or is it different? Is it like people are pushing something new? Tell us more about what you think.
So as we're coming down off of that boom, I think we're about to see some really interesting comics. I think we're going to see a lot more from the indies again.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me of like the mid to late 90s, where even like the big guys like Marvel and DC went from like these really like the extreme studio style, the image style, to like you had guys coming out of weird cartoon backgrounds. They brought up all those indie guys like Peter Bagg working for Marvel and doing like superhero comics, even though they were like send ups and like not really canon or anything. I'm not sure what the future holds for that type of thing, but I think, especially since DC is now being distributed by Random House, I think, or is it Random House? I can't remember. They've a lot of people have moved away from Diamond,
Mhm.
which had like basically a monopoly on comic distribution. And now that like Marvel is doing sort of its own distribution again and actually kind of succeeding where they had nearly tanked the company before, DC now ships on Tuesday as opposed to Wednesday. And, like I think that's going to cause some interesting ripples. I mean, also the fact that more and more like the big two are like DC and Marvel are, they're subsidiaries of mega corporations now. They're no longer just like their own, sure, it's a big company, but
Yeah.
like we're in the business of comics. So it's like Warner Brothers bought out DC, and then I think it's AT&T that owns Warner Brothers now, and
We're gonna have to do a
it
lot of
was
fact checking here.
oh my god, yeah. I mean, again, there's people pulling out their hair and yelling at their computers right now. But was bought because of the logos.
Yeah.
The logos are worth more than the comics ever were. So I think that's going to create an interesting space where hopefully stories are going to be able to thrive, because at the end of the day, that's the most important part. Is if you want people to read comics, you got to give them something good to read. Like either it's got to be great to look at, but that story has to be there. I again raised in a bookstore, so that's always my most important thing.
Well, you think back to being kids, and we're all different ages here, but I mean the things that inspired us, whether it's the superheroes,
Yeah,
the big ones, right? Batman, Superman, right, and the villains, of course. And then you think about
yeah,
Star Wars, right, as a
yeah,
franchise, right? Capture the imagination. It's you keep coming back for more and all the different things, whether it's the comic books, the cards, the swag, the merchandise, the action figures.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I don't. We're in the collectibles business, so we don't want
yeah.
to say any heresy here. But it seems like some of the comic book stuff has gotten a little bit oversaturated. On the movie side, at least, right? I
For
just can't
sure.
Yeah.
keep up with it. Like
Well,
it,
I mean that's going to come in waves too. I think the kids who are growing up watching the all these superhero movies now,
yeah,
and sure they might be slowing down a little. That nostalgia factor is going to come back in a few years.
yeah.
These people are going to be like, oh man, I loved watching those as a kid. Why don't I watch them again? Man, I want to read some Iron Man. Like
The
I've watched.
Iron Man did it right. Like Iron Man really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Maybe they could have left out the last one, but Iron Man was awesome. Venom, like I never read Venom, but the movie
yeah.
actually brought me into it. Like I was like, okay, that's
Oh, really?
pretty cool. As we come to a close here, I want to give you thank you again, Angus,
Hey,
for sharing
thank
the
I
time
you.
with
appreciate your
us.
time. For
Just
sure.
so the audience knows, they may have tuned in a little later, but Angus Byers is a comic book collector and tattoo artist based in Montreal, Canada. Again, really, really appreciated you sharing the story. If you liked what you heard today on collectibles.com unscripted, make sure you like, follow, or subscribe to the podcast, and be sure to check out collectibles.com, a special community that we like to say is powered by passion, where hundreds of thousands of collectors just like you, just like Angus, will be hanging out. Thanks.
Thank you. This was
Thank you,
great.
Angus.